So far you already learned how do you add different type of part in your assembly file. In this lesson I will show you how do you add one assembly file in another assembly. Suppose this is the top level assembly. Inside this assembly you can see there are a few parts here. If you want, you can add the assembly file inside this assembly. To add another assembly, if I go to this insert component, if I go to the browse, and from here I have to select my desired assembly file, then if I select open, you can see this is the another assembly file. I can insert it anywhere, and in this feature manager tree you can see this has been listed here. But here you can see this icon is different than this icon because this is part and this is assembly. And if I want, I can apply a few mate here. I added the desired mate here, and now you can see this is another assembly inside this top level assembly, and this is that assembly file. When you will insert one assembly in other assembly, at the time the bottom level assembly will behave like a part, because if I select this assembly and if I try to move this assembly, this will behave like a part. This is moving in this way, but if I want, I can also resist this motion. So I will apply another mate between these two, and I will fix this assembly. And you can see there is no minus sign in front of this name. That means this assembly is fixed now. And if I try to move this assembly, I can't move this assembly. So by this way you can add the assembly inside another assembly. If I go inside this assembly, and you can see this is the fixed, but this is floating state. So if I try to move this part, I can move this part. But if I want to see this behavior inside another assembly, I can't see that thing because this is inside another assembly. There is another step you have to follow if you want to move this part inside another assembly. So I will discuss about this thing in the next lesson. But in this lesson, before I finish this lesson, I will show you few other things. Suppose this is my one assembly. If I want to add one more item, suppose if I want to add this item within this assembly, I have to just click and hold this part, and I have to drag and drop to this assembly, and you can see two arrow in opposite direction is showing here. And if I release my mouse button, it will give you the warning if you have any mate that it will delete, or if you have any type of exploded view that it will delete. For this part, if I want to add this part to this assembly, this will delete this exploded view. Why? Because if I go to this exploded view state, you can see in this configuration there is one exploded view. If I explode this, you can see this inside this exploded view, this part already added. That's why if I try to move this part to this assembly, this will delete this exploded view. So if I press move, that part, this part will be moved to this down level assembly. So by this way I can make also this type of assembly. If I try to move any part from this bottom assembly to the top level assembly, I can also do that thing. Suppose this is that part, this is inside this bottom level assembly. If I try to move this part to the up level, and if I release outside this assembly, you can see this part has been added to the top level assembly. This part is not inside this bottom level assembly. So by this way you can change your part from one bottom level assembly to the top level assembly, or from the top level assembly to the bottom level assembly. Now I will show you another type of way to make the assembly from the part which is present inside one assembly. Like you can see, there is an assembly, there are a few parts and one assembly here. So if I want to make one assembly by using these two parts, I have to select these two parts, right click, and from here you can see form new sub assembly here. You can see there are a few warning it is showing because this part has been linked with another part by using the mate, and if you have any type of mate or any type of exploded view or any type of pattern, then this will delete when I will make one new assembly from this part. So this is that warning. If I press move, you can see this is the assembly, and if I go inside this assembly, you can see this is the two part. So from the present part, from the main top level assembly, you can make the another sub assembly by selecting part one by one. And what is the reason behind this to make one sub assembly under another sub assembly? And this is very good to make one sub assembly or two sub assembly inside another assembly, main assembly, because if you make very huge assembly, and in that assembly if you make small sub assembly, then it will be very easy for you to manage this huge assembly file, and this will be very helpful for a design group, because in a design group if you have 10 designer under your supervision, you can give small sub assembly to one designer and you can give another sub assembly to another designer. This is also helpful for that type of environment. And if you make your documentation, that means when you will make 2D drawing, at the time you may need this different type of sub assembly file.